Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show. I am curious to know, did you write a book yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I get that question a lot.
Yeah. And what stopped you from it?
Just because my journey has been a very ever-evolving process. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt like, of course, you could write a book and then you do an updated version of it, right, as things change. But I never wanted to put a book out there and feel like I'm bound or stuck to what I write about, or the principles in the book. For me, I want to ever evolve. I want to ever change. So in that way, the whole dynamic of writing a book just didn't appeal in regards to that. But I've got to say that, in the last probably year especially, that things are starting to become, yes, it's still evolving in many ways, but we're kind of hitting very focal, central principles or knowings or understandings of what I do and what I provide. So that is on the horizon in regards to a book. And it just didn't feel right, before now, to look at that, because it just felt like it was a medium that, because I see so many people, not so much in the energy world, but many people in the health world, especially with nutrition and those sorts of things and diet, like they've written a book and then themselves have had a health crisis because they've stuck to what the book adheres to. It's like it's become a religion, so to speak. So I never wanted to put myself in that situation, right? And then all of a sudden there's a backlash of people going, oh, but in the book you say this, and now you're saying you're sick and you're doing this now, So I always felt what I provide is a medium that is ever evolving. So I just felt like the book option was just not an option, but I'm warming to it. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to. However, there are ways to write that eliminate what you're talking about. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's like because language, is so 3D, right? For lack of a better description, and it's confining. We're never taught to necessarily write like that, but at least given my experience with marketing and so forth, I have just the things I've done. I've learned to recognize, oh no, don't put that word in there. Why? Because that dates it, or because that, that makes it feel even more constricted than it really is. And so you may not have statements that are as clear cut per se, like, it's really very similar to working in this field where somebody asked me one time, they were talking about how do you know if somebody's under hypnosis? And the way I came to describe it is like, it's this really strange combination of vague and very specific at the same time.
Yeah. Because it's keeping it very open-ended in many ways, right? So people can kind of decipher what they want to take from it themselves, right? So I because when I look at my social media, in regards to the posts, all the things I'm writing up, because it's just we're not just putting out a meme, right? Or something that's a body of work that someone else has put across. A lot of it's stuff that comes through me. So I get a lot of people that ask me and go, hey, I saw your article the other day or what you're talking about in a session. Where do I go? Where's a book that you can recommend? Yeah. I go, there's no book that came through me. So it didn't come from a book. But
Oh, they're
and
asking for a reference.
asking for a reference.
So my question is, when they're asking you for a reference, do you feel like they're asking you for a reference so that they can go entertain their mind with that? Or are they
Hmm.
asking because they want more of that idea to come through?
I think a bit of both, but I think definitely with the fact that they want to, um, in their own personal time, to explore that, to learn more about that, which is a really good thing. That's something that I encourage with them. But it, it, if you amass all the stuff that are written, over a period of time, it's like, well, there's probably a number of books within that. But
Yeah, well, what I like about the way that you speak about things, whether it's in written form or not, um, is I don't know. I just feel like you have this very clear picture of, in a sense, it's more like a structure of kind of the way, quote, the world, meaning our experience of whatever we are here, right?
yeah,
Whatever that is and how it functions, and it's a different perspective. So, I'm learning that this is essentially just the way that I see things, like the way I
mm,
perceive is when you speak, there's an image that's very clear about what things are and what things aren't. And I almost want to say, can you paint the painting so that we can, like just so that
yeah.
they see that and perceive it, even just and take it in, you know.
Well, I'm very aware that I'm talking about, in some ways, it might be the alternative of the alternative, right? Or the extreme of the extreme. But in the end, I don't, my job is not fulfilled unless the person understands, right? So where I'm coming from. So I like to create and, kind of connections to everyday life, right? Everyday world for people and use analogies
Hmm.
to simplify and keep it simple because I feel like in the world that we live in today, thanks to the internet, there's really infinite sources of information. So it's more about how we can apply that information and how we can understand it, right? So, and how it applies to our everyday life,
Hmm.
which means then how we can use that, right,
Yeah.
to its maximum potential. So, yeah, infinite sources of information, but I still feel there's a lack of knowing and understanding still out there. So I really like to let my clients know that, okay, I might be reaching into some extremes here, especially if this is new to them, because there's many clients that like, yeah, I know what you're talking about straight away. Um, and but put it in a simple fashion and make it and make it simple and understandable because the more advanced we're going to become is what I'm finding is to actually make things more simpler.
Hmm.
And I feel like a lot of the way that we're conditioned as humans is to perceive that our advancements going to be more complicated stuff. And for me, there's so much complicated stuff out there that people are aware of, but they don't know much about it or a knowing or an understanding of how it works. And because it's kind of presented in a very complex way, it's like an example is DNA and genetics. So anyone knows that, wow, DNA and genetics and getting into genes and all sorts of things, wow, it's pretty extreme and it's pretty out there. It's like no way I can understand that, right? But it's really holistic. We put it in a really simple format to make it nice and simple because for me, the core aspects of life are simple. It's just that the way we've been conditioned to process what we perceive, we put it in a complicated state. We change something that's simple and what we could say is simply what is.
Hmm.
And then through our understanding of mind, thought, mentality, we tend to translate it into a very complex thing, that it originally wasn't.
Yeah, I agree
Mm.
completely. And actually, I whatever you, I'm just going to call it channeling because that's what the new hot term is, right? When you're connected and you're getting your information. I have
Yeah.
at least found it way simpler. Like three words maximum or something, and it's, and then the other people are just nonstop, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, it's still these three words, the answer is
Yeah,
still right
that's
here,
it.
right there at the beginning. Yeah.
I'll let the analogy, yeah, and sometimes it'll be just a word someone says, and I'm just like, and because when you get into channeling and you get more into that knowing, right, that intuition aspect, you get very aware by you've got more self-awareness, right? There's always things coming across you and trying to, words, topics, things you're looking at. And a lot of people just shrug them off because they don't have the awareness, right? The self-awareness to, oh, that's interesting. Let's explore that more. So it might be just a word that someone brings up, and you're like, oh, that heightens something. I'm going to look into that a little bit more, right? So things like that are really important. I like to actually use an analogy, like as you mentioned, that it can be just, people might say something in a certain way, but as you say, it's like there's three words that just keep coming up or a common theme. And the analogy I like to use is, you can bake so many different cakes, but every cake, the main three or four ingredients are all the same,
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm.
Right? So it's this aspect that people are like, oh, this is amazing that this is this cake and this is this cake, because we compartmentalize all these different things, which then creates the complexity. But really, at the basis, the foundation of all of those things, all those variables, are the same. It's the same thing. So, and a lot of the times, that baseline is the cause to the effect, right? On the effect level, which for people when they're dealing with a health problem is the symptoms they're getting, right? Which is really the body expressing itself, which I call the effect.
Okay.
But there's a cause to that effect, right? And generally, where we're conditioned out of mind thought mentality, we chase the effect with a lack of knowing or understanding of the cause to that effect, right? And the effect's only there because of a cause, right? So a lot of the times the cause is always going to be a lot more simple than the effect, because the effect comes out as so many different symptoms and so many different parts of the body, um, and they're hence they're expressed in different areas of the body, and there could be so many variables in play with that, and hence the complexity of, oh, I've got to deal with that, I've got to deal with that, I've got to deal with that. It's a bit like in the medical system. I was talking to someone about the other day. You get started on one medication, and then you start to get deficiencies or side effects out of that one medication. So within 6 months now, you're on 5 medications, right? So all these different variables all show up. Where when we go to the cause, it's bring things back into a more singular fashion, where we simplify. And the cool thing about that is you're not chasing effect, like you're trimming the branches off a plant. You're going straight to the cause to pull the roots of the plant out. So, and it's always going to be simpler. The complexity comes out of chasing the effect, right, and working on the effect, which really our conventional modern medical system is based on treating the effect,
Hmm.
focusing on the effect. And that's why so many people are going, oh, I get this all the time, right? I went and saw my doctor and they say I've got this and they're not unsure. Now went to another expert or specialist and they say this and it doesn't fit with the other person, because they're all working in that effect level. That they don't have the knowing or understanding of the cause to the effect.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like, um, and we're all in bodies, we're all in the same boat with that.
Yeah, yeah,
But I feel like I keep getting the message over and over, and even as you're talking, it was coming through. The cause is always, on some level, not, um, let's see, how do I say this? Not living from the heart or
yeah,
acknowledge
correct,
some part of
correct. Yeah, very much so. And also, what I would say about that, that really the cause or the origin of everything is in the unseen.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean it's not influencing the scene. It is, right? Because a lot of people will kind of say, hey, let's compartmentalize. We've got body over here and we've got spirit over here. No, you don't compartmentalize the two because they're associated with each other, right? Each part, each component, each faction needs the other,
Yeah.
right? So, um, and our spirit, our soul is the heart. The heart facilitates that. A lot of work that I've been doing of late, probably the last few months, especially, is looking into conception. The word conception, right, which is talking about origin and talking about those two factions. Funnily enough, right, the concept because there's two conceptions for us. There's the conception of the body, right, which is the conception that essentially everyone knows about, right? We don't have to go into great depth about that, right? A man and a woman come together, right? Which you could see as a man as one polarity, a woman the other polarity. And when you bring those polarities together, it creates this little zone in the middle of the overlapping of the two, which we call a state of conception or a state of neutrality. Neutrality means balance. Okay. Um, Actually, I'll show you whether we're doing video. I'm probably just doing audio for the call, but I'm going to show you here, Blair. So this is
Yeah, two rings overlapping. Yes.
yeah. So we see this as the geometry or the symbol of conception, where each ring, and that is one is the polarities, right? So two polarities make duality, right? And dualities, though, when those two polarities are apart from each other, they're opposing each other. But when we bring those polarities together, it creates that lovely Vesica Pisces geometry in the middle, which is neutrality, it's balance. Okay. In fact, in mathematics, if we take that Vesica Pisces and we put a line right down the middle, that's called root 3, right? And there's actually a geometrician, expert in geometry, Frank Chester, who created a geometry called the Chesterhedron. And he found that after studying that geometry, found it was the geometry of the heart, the human heart. And he talks about a lot in his work, root 3, which is that space in between that Vesica Pisces, which is balance, it's neutrality. This is why when we get our heart involved as much as possible in our life, it brings and shifts things into balance. Okay. And this is what humanity needs more than ever right now, because we're really, when people talk about the matrix or the prison world, it's keeping us in a duality state, which is to remove that balance, right? So the heart is the key to kind of unlocking ourselves out of that prison or confinement or limitation of what duality is all about. And so the cell, the prison cell is kind of that gamma duality that we're in. The key is the heart. So we've got the conception of the body, right? And of course, as I said, man and woman come together, conception of the body. And we've got to remember that when the formation of that embryo is starting, there's no one driving that ship, right? Or driving that body yet. It's just a shell. It's a body, right? So there's another conception, right, of bringing spirit, the soul in, that's then going to drive that vehicle, so to speak. And so that is when we get here. And the way that we get here is through a wormhole we know and reference as the heart. Okay. So it's not until the embryo starts forming the heart that's when the soul comes in to utilize that body for a lifetime. So as I say, they both need each other, right? So the body is kind of a vehicle for us to have an experience here. So we can take what we are as a soul, which is really formless frequencies, and convert it into formed creation. And this is where the word information comes from, right? To translate those frequencies to become form, and form is matter, physical reality. So this is something that we've been working a lot on. And we've really been working, this is where it goes a bit extreme. Obviously, what I've talked about now is is just an understanding of our origin, and also having a greater understanding of purpose of why we're here, which this is what I love to do. But when we looked at the conception of the body, right? Because I make tensor technology products, pendants and stuff that we make. And the pendant that I'm showing here, Blair, is which is the geometry or symbology of conception. We've made two of these with two different energetics. One of them is based on the conception of the body, and one of them is based on the conception of getting the heart open, getting the soul, and more of your consciousness here. And you've got to remember this consciousness is an infinite consciousness, which means consciousness and energy, an energy that knows no boundary or limitation. That's what that means, okay? So when I say infinite consciousness to my clients, I go, you got to realize that when I open your heart and I facilitate that into an area of your body that needs it, right? So let's say saying they've got symptoms or a health problem there. I'm saying I'm sending energy that knows no boundary or limitation to that. That's what you originally authentically are as a soul consciousness. So the realization here and the question has to be, why does our life as the human become so confined and limited, right? Maybe that's not all of us, but for the most part, that's what people experience. And out of that limitation and confinement, that's where all the problems come out of, funnily enough, right? Is because we're losing our connection with our authenticity, where we came from, our soul, our heart, right? As you were mentioning about implying before. And we've kind of created mentalities and stories that kind of limit and lock our way that we perceive in reality, that are always limiting us and confining us, right? We need to break free from that. And the heart is a very important component of that. Now, for the conception pendant that is more based on the body, we've been looking at things like fertility, right? Because fertility problems are more advanced than they ever have been, which is the ability to create that space or state of neutrality, right? Conception, to create a body, right? So to have a child. So with that product and that pendant, we're hoping to really dig our teeth into improving fertility, but also balancing hormones as well, right? Because when we look at a human, when we're talking about the game of duality or, the matrix or the prison world, we're talking about two polarities breaking apart from each other, excuse me, and which is getting stuck in duality. And what that's causing then, an imbalance in that person's physiology, right? When we look at the body. And the two areas that we get unbalanced the most is our nervous system and our hormonal system, right? Because when those two things become imbalanced, then we get triggered very easily. Like, for example, that's when people go, oh my God, I don't feel grounded, and I feel overwhelmed all the time. I feel stressed, which is when we're starting to embody energies that are not our own, and they get embedded in our nervous system, and they can find a limit our nervous system. Our nervous system can't expand, and it wants to, right? Because our original purpose in coming here as a soul consciousness was here to expand, right? To expand our creation, not limit it. So, and then obviously that with the nervous system, when that gets overwhelmed, it means that we get triggered a lot easier, right? And when we get triggered a lot easily or easier, we all of a sudden lose our self-awareness, right? Which means we lose sight of how we're applying ourselves, which means how we apply our energy. And we get overwhelmed and stressed and all these other things that we get kind of stuck in a vicious cycle or loop. Same thing with the hormones. When the hormones are about balance. And when the hormones lose their balance, then again, you lose your self-awareness, you get triggered a lot easier, and you also you lose that balance in the way that you use your emotions.
Hmm. Yep.
Okay. So so we've been working on, looking at that conception geometry and energy to help bring those sorts of things into balance. We've also made a product which we call the quantum ring, which is a product that specifically works with the nervous system. And just recently, actually, the other day, a lady who'd purchased that was instant, and I don't like to tell them too much about the product because then it gets lodged in as a mentality, right? So all of a sudden she's wearing it, and then within a couple of days she goes, "Oh, I'm smiling. I just feel happier and I'm calmer and stuff like that." And I go, "Well, there you go." It's this aspect of now all of a sudden you're relinquishing the energies that you're not now to facilitate the energies that you are. And that's how I always say it to my clients. Say, have you got your heart open? You're facilitating more of who you are. But if your heart's closing up, you're not, instead of not facilitating who you are, you're now embodying what you're not. And the body will tell you. And that's the thing about the body. The body is a form of discernment. And a lot of the symptoms that you then experience through the body are there to give you a guide of where you're at.
Yeah.
Right? So you can get back on track. Right? Mm.
So I have a question. There was a new, I'm just going to explain what it is, and then we can go and see what we do there.
Yeah.
So it was related to doing some energy work, and it was based in the duality in the sense that the idea is presented just to imagine it this way so you can understand the concept, which you've already touched on. But this is, I think we're bringing a different idea of it in here. So let's say there's two ends of a spectrum, and you might see it as a range, and they're almost like opposite. But instead of it being like 2D, where it's just flat on a line, it's more like if it was represented on 2D, would be better represented as a circle.
Yep.
Where on that spectrum are you closer to one point or another? They might be opposite. I kind of feel like really it's not even at all 2D or even maybe 3D, but it's more like a field in which you might be closer to one representation or another. And the way you might bring something to you that you feel is more aligned with you is being aware of that field. So here's my question. If we are aware that there is a field that includes both sides of this spectrum, there is also an acknowledgement that we are both energies. And I feel like when you were talking earlier, there was like what was coming through is when people have the full awakening recognition that we are all one.
Yes.
One of the things that happens is that impatience usually disintegrates for the most part, except when you're out of balance, right? Because you start to see these other people as, again, just on the spectrum. They have a different facet of their experience that they're sharing with you. You get to different, it's another part of the spectrum here. So given that, I'm curious to see what you have to say about experiencing both ends of the spectrum. If we are all one, they're there for a purpose. Those, like you said, it's a barometer in a sense to keep you aware of where you are in terms of balance.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to, excuse me, it comes back to the original purpose of why consciousness is here, right? To live an experience through what we call an interface, the body. And that is every consciousness wants to evolve itself. And the way it evolves itself, especially by coming here, is to have experience, right? To create reality that will have experience within it that is new, right? Because we want to have new experiences to convert into wisdom, right? So why someone might be over here and another on another end of the spectrum or in a different place is it gives a wide array of different experiences to amplify and accumulate that ability to convert that into wisdom, because there is one step in having experience, but there's another step in converting it into wisdom. And what I mean by that, because when we have a lot of experience but don't convert it into wisdom, this is a big reason why we keep reincarnating here. Okay. So if we want to look at, karma, right? Because karma comes into this too. Because we're talking about a recycling loop, right? Whether it's something we're experiencing now, and let's say it's presenting to itself, right? And let's say we're not self-aware to pick up on it, or to pick up on why we're having that experience, right? Which is a big part in then, as we said before earlier about the knowing and the understanding of it, that's the ability to then convert it into wisdom. Let's say we don't get it. It comes up again, right? It gives you another chance. You have another moment of that in the same day, it might seem sometimes, or the next day or next week, right? Which is, it's coming around. It's another cycle giving you an opportunity. A lot of people perceive all these things as, bad luck or things get after them, or actually a lot of things in life are rooting for you. They're actually trying to help you, even including people that go for a health problem. I've got symptoms, I've got aches and pains everywhere. You're misinterpreting the reason why we have a body. The body's trying to let you know and get you back on track. That's really what it's trying to do. It's just we've misunderstood and misinterpreted by the way we've been conditioned to believe what symptoms are. So going back to that loop, right? The bigger loop is lifetimes, right? A reincarnation. Now, what is required to then convert those experiences into wisdom is connected to the heart. Oh, funny that, eh? And it's the expression to get to the heart of the matter, because we're experiencing it in a physical sense, right? So that's where the word matter comes from. And of course, it's saying what we need to understand it, which is the heart. Now, so the thing about the heart, right? The heart wants you to be self-aware. It wants you to be, it doesn't care about 5 minutes before or 5 minutes in the future. And that's not because it doesn't care about you. It means it's trying to emphasize that life's the now and that's all there is. Okay. The only important choice you need to make is the one you have to make now. Okay. So it's emphasizing to be self-aware of your choice in the moment. And so your heart, and hence what facilitates you, is the soul, which I say is you without all the conditioning, right? This is the important aspect of why we present that, your authenticity. It connects to what is, simply what is, okay, which is the very thing that's coming into your awareness that's trying to forge you forward, right? To evolve, to ascend. This is why you're here, right? As a consciousness to keep evolving. Now, when we are not fully present, right? And of course, when we're in the heart, that's why we have the experience, but we can connect into a greater sense of understanding and knowing of what that experience is all about. Hence, that allows us to convert that experience into wisdom. But for a majority of humans, and this is why I work so much with the heart and the understanding of that, when we are more mind-orientated, thought-orientated, mentality-orientated, especially mentality, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, is that we don't stay with what is. We start to change what is into our own little story, right? Based on our past experience and all these sorts of things. So often we lose sight of the very reason or purposeful understanding of why we have that experience. And hence we don't get to the heart of the matter, and hence we don't convert that experience into wisdom. And what happens, we start to accumulate experience. And I believe this is a big key or big understanding or knowing of why people get cognitive issues like dementia, Alzheimer's, and those sorts of things. I see them as like a computer that's run out of
RAM.
hard drive space, right?
Yep.
RAM, yep, right? Because they've accumulated so much experience that hasn't been converted into wisdom, okay? Because when we convert into wisdom, we don't hold on to it, we let it go. And I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me here, right? When you're a channeler, and and of course you've got to be very present, right? You create that state to be a channeler. You trust in the moment that the answers that you need for that moment are going to come, which means you're not holding on to it. You're just trusting the process that your guide, your soul, your consciousness is going to facilitate what you need that's connected to that very moment, what you're experiencing, and you trust that process. And that's not about holding on to anything. That's not about attachment. That's not about dependency. It's about flow and remaining in the flow. Okay. And this is also important with flow, with channeling, but it's also important with the body because the body works when everything's flowing. When we lose our flow, then we start to see health problems arise. Right. So I always say the path of our spiritual path of ascension, right? To convert experience into wisdom, right? The reason why we're here as a consciousness is the same pathway to wellness and vitality. It's not different. So as we said before, right at the start, how people see is the body and the spirit, and they're two separate things. No, they're not. They're the same. We bring them together because the same path for us supports both. Yeah.
Right. And what I was hearing you saying during that too was I was actually seeing it both as interpersonal with different humans, but you're referring to it as intrapersonal, but it's the same thing as interpersonal, which is
Yep.
you have a group dynamic and this person has a certain personality or they say whatever they say, and it causes the dynamic of the group to change. The same thing happens within. There's a part of you that, steps forward and says or does or thinks or feels or whatever it does, and it helps the unity of the whole thing. But as you said, it's the flow. Because if we start to resist that other person in the group or we resist that part within ourselves, then the whole thing gets out of whack, right? It
It
gets out
does.
of
It
balance.
does. It does. It's also an understand that the people that you are spending a lot of time with, right, or a big part of your experience here, are part of the deal in you converting experience into wisdom, and you are to them,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So they might not be at their path, a certain what's the word here? They might not be at a certain point in their path to fully comprehend and understand that, compared to, let's say, you are,
Mhm.
but it's still there, right? Because the reason we're here is to have experience and convert it into wisdom. So even if it's like, even if you're in a tricky situation and there was conflict or arguments with your partner or wife or husband or whatever like that, we can easily shift in the head and start thinking, oh, this sucks, and why me? Why are you doing this to me? And all the victimhood aspect of it. Or we can stay in the heart, right, and stay very present, realize actually what can I learn from this? Or what can I learn from their behavior? That makes me understand them better, but also understand myself better in regards to this relationship or this connection. So same with our children. So it's a learning game, and and
Yeah,
and and
that's
and if
why you can work on yourself and your relationship gets better, regardless of
yeah,
if
that's
the
it.
other person's involved or not. Yeah.
That's it. And it's also, the more that if you can stay in the heart, then you're increasing the likelihood of them to drop in their heart and things to just effortlessly resolve. But at the same time, you resolve that, but both people come out of it all the better because I've learned something from it. And that's what it's all about.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.